Is Colorado still a great place to live? Now, hey, I just got back from about a 5-week family vacation across the country. We went through 18 different states, so I've got a little bit of a new perspective on it compared to what I did before I left. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask you 5 questions to really get you thinking, is Colorado the right place for you? And then at the end, I'm gonna share my thoughts, which might be a little bit different than what you might expect. All right, so the first question you've got to ask yourself is, what kind of weather do you like? Now today, as you can probably tell, it's a beautiful sunny Colorado day here in Garden of the Gods, but not everybody likes so much sunshine. And I know that probably sounds crazy to you, but if you're moving from the Pacific Northwest, say you're outside of Seattle, yeah, you have mountains up there, so that might seem similar, but we do not get the rainfall that you get whenever you're in the Pacific Northwest. We've got, they always say Colorado 300 plus days of sunshine a year. I think that probably sounds about right. It's definitely sunny a lot here. But are you gonna miss that, just a lot of rainfall that kind of makes things more green and some other stuff we'll talk about. But what kind of weather do you like? Because a lot of people, if you're moving up here from Texas, you're coming from Fort Worth where it's probably 115 degrees today, you're probably gonna say, you know what, I love this weather, it's not too hot. But if you're moving from, I don't know, maybe you're coming down from Montana to Colorado, it's a whole lot hotter down here as well than what it is up in the far north. So you've really got to think through about what kind of weather you like, not just what kind of weather you think you might like. The second question you have to ask yourself if you're actually thinking about coming to Colorado to decide, is it a good state to live in? What kind of recreation do you do? If you are all about wakeboarding, I don't know if Colorado's gonna be the best place for you. You're probably not gonna be that happy with it. We really don't have a lot of lakes. We got a couple reservoirs, but not a lot. So what you do kind of outside of work, recreational time, I personally think that should really play heavily into your decision on if Colorado is a good state to live in for you. So, if you're from the Northeast and you're doing the freaking skiing ice all winter long, you're like, man, I just want to ski in some powder, but you love to ski, Colorado might be a really, really good fit. Hiking, mountain biking, climbing, hiking some big mountains, some 14ers, or even doing a little bit of mountaineering on some of those big peaks in the wintertime. If that's your jam, then Colorado probably makes a lot of sense compared to most of the country. But like I said, if it's all about water sports, or you just kind of say, you know what, I don't think I'm gonna do anything outside, I'm probably just gonna stay inside most of the time. It's what I personally like to do. If that's kind of what you're thinking, I don't know, you might wanna save some of that cost of living because it is a little bit pricier here and maybe move somewhere else. So what you do recreationally outside of work, and remember, don't just think about you, think about your family. If you're married, you have kids, one or the other, whatever the case is, if there's another decision maker that's gonna play into this, make sure you consider what they like to do as well. We've definitely had some clients that have moved to Colorado Springs and thought, man, you know what, I'm gonna get into that. And then they don't get into it. We might talk about mountains here a little bit later, but that's just a big theme that we see is people think they're gonna do something, but they've never done it before and they get here and they really don't like it. Now, fortunately, there's enough recreational stuff to do that most people find something they really like to do. But again, make sure you think about that before you head this way. Question number 3 you gotta ask yourself is, what kind of environment do I like? Now, I know we talked earlier about weather. I'm kind of separating those two a little bit because I think it does make a big difference. So while the weather definitely impacts the type of environment you're in, I think people sometimes forget about just kind of that general feel. Like I said, we just got back from a trip across the country. We spent a lot of time in the Appalachian Mountain area, kind of from West Virginia down to Tennessee area, Alabama. So in that area, honestly, after living in Colorado for so long, it felt like the freaking jungle, man. I thought I was in the Amazon. Everything was just green and leafy, humid, like we talked about with the kind of weather. So just that environment if that's the area you're coming from, man, I'd definitely plan a trip to Colorado to check it out, because we even have friends that come out from Ohio, where I'm originally from, and they come out here and they always comment on how brown it is. And if I'm being honest with you, when we got back from our trip just a couple days ago, pulling onto the road that I live on, out in Black Forest, and started looking around, I'm like, man, it's pretty freaking brown out here. Like a lot of the green grass that was really nice back, at the beginning of June when we took off, it had browned up already. So it's just kind of definitely more that, especially in Colorado Springs, it's high desert, so you have a lot more brown, not that super leafy, lush green area. So if that's a big thing for you, that's a super big impact, definitely think about the type of environment you like before you head out this way. Question number 4, you have to ask yourself, for you to decide if Colorado is a good state to live in, is what kind of cultural scene do you like? What do you really enjoy? And when I say culture, I'm personally thinking music venues, sporting events, plays, shows, art scenes, stuff like that. So if you're coming from Chicago, LA, New York, I'm gonna admit, the Front Range of Colorado is not gonna be that cultural scene. But what I will say, again, after traveling a lot of the country here recently, gave me that new perspective to say, you know what? Colorado Front Range, if we include Colorado Springs, Denver, and Fort Collins, there's actually a lot of good stuff here. And compared to how it was when I moved here almost 20 years ago in 2005, drastically different. So if you want good sporting events, every single thing you want is in Denver. So we've got, every single major franchise as far as like the NBA, NFL, everything you want is in Denver for sure. If you want to go to a play or a show, the Buell Theater downtown Denver. We've got the Ent Performing Arts Center here in Colorado Springs, the Pikes Peak Performing Arts Center here in the Springs, building a huge new outdoor amphitheater music venue that's already started to draw some really big acts right here on the north side of Colorado Springs. So if you're looking for a good cultural scene, I personally think that now, would not have said this a couple years ago, but now Colorado Springs and the Colorado Front Range might just be what you're looking for, but definitely compared to where you're at now and what you really enjoy. All right, before we get to question number 5, you have to ask yourself, let me just take a real quick second to remind everybody that we are a real estate sales team here in the Colorado Springs area, and this channel is all about everything Colorado Springs, where to eat, work, live, play, whatever it might be. So if you have any questions whatsoever, maybe thinking about a trip out this way, maybe thinking about a move out this way, definitely hit us up. We're the guys, we answer the phones, we answer the questions. We want to make sure you have all the information if you're thinking about a move to Colorado. And finally, number 5. Now this one, you really got to ask yourself, and you got to be honest with yourself, how important are the mountains to you, really? So obviously one of the huge draws to Colorado as a state are the Rocky Mountains. It's beautiful scenery, a ton of recreational stuff to do, but you gotta ask yourself, are you gonna ski? Do you ski now currently? Are you gonna get out, or are you gonna hike a 14er? Or is it kind of the fact that you just think the mountains just kind of sound cool? I can think of probably 4 or 5 people in the last, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years that have moved to Colorado, specifically here to the Colorado Springs area, and then have left Colorado to move either back where they were from or maybe to a different part of the country that didn't have something to do with like a job move or military PCS or something. And all of those people, the reason that they told me is, you know what, I really don't do anything in the mountains. So they came to Colorado because it was the cool thing to do, right? Everybody says, man, the mountains are beautiful in Colorado, which is true, but they thought they would get into those mountain activities a lot more than what they actually did. And at the end of the day, they were pretty to look at, but that didn't outweigh some of the negatives that we've talked about with Colorado. So you've really got to think about, am I going to get out and enjoy the mountains? Am I going to actually do some of those activities that you can only do in the mountains? Even if it's just, hey, I like to go take wildlife photography pictures of the leaves changing and birds and flowers and that kind of stuff, and then the snow in the wintertime. If you're going to do that stuff, awesome. But like I said, you really got to be honest with yourself, because I think there's some people that move to Colorado just because they think that it sounds cool to be in the mountains. All right, so we talked through 5 questions that, in my opinion, you've really got to ask yourself if you're thinking, is Colorado a good state for me to live in? And like I said, I just got back from this long trip, so my perspective's a lot different than what it was before. Some of the things that I didn't think I cared about whatsoever, like the fact that it's kind of dry and brown here and there's really not a lot of greenery. I mean, it's not terrible, don't get me wrong, but compared to back east, if you live on the mid-Atlantic, anywhere in Appalachia, honestly, most of the eastern part of the country, it's drastically different. And I never really thought about that a lot until I went on this trip and I came back to Colorado. So, we talked about the weather, we talked about the environment, the recreational stuff, what it is that you really like to do. For me personally, that's one of the biggest draws. And as I traveled around, I realized that the things that I like to do recreationally, I love to get out in the mountains. I like to ski, I like the mountaineering aspect of stuff. I love to hunt big game animals, which you have a lot of in Colorado. So the things that I like to do, that's a huge draw, and probably the #1 reason for me that I still like it here compared to the other places that I visited. We also talked about the cultural scene and how that's changing a lot in Colorado, and it's getting a ton better than what it used to be. Like I said, I've been here for almost 20 years now, and it's night and day difference compared to what it was. So just all these different things that you've really got to ask yourself. And the last one we talked about, like the mountains, do I really care about them? Am I going to be in them? Am I just going to look at them? Because that might kind of wear out after a while. So there's a lot of hard questions that I think, if I was thinking about moving to Colorado, I'd definitely be asking myself. And like I mentioned, my perspective has changed a little bit. And do I think Colorado's still a good place to live? Yeah, I do. But it's because of the answers that I personally have for those 5 questions. So if you answer those questions and you're like, yeah, you know what? I hate the humidity. I don't really care if it's a little bit drier and a little bit browner. I don't really care. I just don't want it to be humid. And I love to get out on a hike and I love to climb. And I like it kind of an up and coming cultural scene that I don't need all the stuff that I have in the DC metro area. Then hey, it probably makes a whole lot of sense. And Colorado probably is an awesome place to live. But if you're like, man, you know what? I don't think I'm gonna get in the mountains very much. I really don't think I'm gonna, do some of that recreational stuff that Colorado offers. And I really, really like green vegetation and I like this humidity. Colorado's probably not the best place for you to live, even though it's always rated as one of the top states in the country to live in. So all that to say, yes, I still think Colorado is a good place to live. But before taking this trip, I would have said, hands down, everybody, you gotta come here, no doubt about it. Whereas now, if I take that step back and I'm honest, I gotta say, you know what? It's a big fat, it depends. And you gotta do the research. You gotta, do that due diligence. You owe yourself, take a trip out to see if for you, Colorado is still a good place to live.